world where magic and monsters were the norm, a lone adventurer dared to break a taboo. A diary of a certain nobleman once said, "Devouring monsters is taboo in this world. For a human, eating a monster means taking in their evil essence. The first symptom of absorbing this essence is an indescribable elation, accompanied by a strengthening of the body. The second symptom brings severe headaches, nausea, and intoxication. The third symptom is sudden death, or possibly, the consumer could turn into a monster themselves." A couple of days ago, in the vast world where magic and monsters were common, there lay the frontier city, a territory home to multiple labyrinths. Among these labyrinths was one called the Miasma Labyrinth. The air inside this labyrinth continually chipped away at the status of visiting adventurers. Most adventurers hated it, but one person was different from the others. Instead of avoiding the labyrinth, he visited it frequently. Soon, he was known as the Miasma Scavenger. But he didn't go to the labyrinth just to get high on miasma. No, he ventured there to harvest herbs that could only be acquired under these specific conditions. Most adventurers couldn't even last on the early floors of the dungeon, which allowed him to monopolize these herbs easily. The miasma grass he harvested had the effect of purifying miasma, making it an irreplaceable source of income for him. However, he knew the rules of supply and demand too well, so he didn't take too much. He only took what he needed, an amount that would last him around 3 days. With this, he made his way out of the labyrinth with a satisfied expression, as he knew he would be eating well tonight. But this was still a labyrinth after all, and since Rudy was on the 6th floor, he easily encountered monsters along the way. They weren't just any overgrown rats, they were miasma rats, creatures notorious for their toxic miasma and poison. This didn't surprise Rude, as many of the monsters that lived here thrived on these noxious elements, which contributed to why most adventurers avoided this place like the plague. Against him, however, that wouldn't work. He easily ignored their attacks, phasing through the fog, and swiftly killed the rat closest to him with a precise strike. But the rats were relentless. Even after seeing their comrade taken down, they didn't hesitate, launching themselves at Ruade with reckless abandon. He managed to take care of the first one, but missed the second, giving it the opportunity to lunge at him, aiming to bite his entire hand off. As the rat's teeth got perilously close to penetrating his skin, a sudden shout of fireball echoed through the labyrinth, diverting his attention. The next thing Rude saw was the rat engulfed in scorching flames. The force of the fireball was so intense that it knocked the rat to the other side of the wall, where it exploded upon impact, sending bits of smoldering fur and flesh flying. Rude was stunned, never having seen such a powerful spell before. His train of thought was interrupted, as he overheard the spellcaster sighing in frustration, lamenting that they had missed their intended target. They spoke unapologetically, as if Rude wasn't even there. From what he understood, it seemed these adventurers had been aiming for him instead of the rat, but since they had inadvertently saved his life, they just rolled with it, continuing their conversation as if nothing had happened. And Rude had seen these faces plenty of times at the Adventurers Guild, which made him even more pissed. It looked like they knew him, but didn't regard him as anything significant. Even when they extended a hand to help him up, he knew it was all an act. So he ignored their gesture and expressed his appreciation for the sentiment, but firmly stated he would appreciate a heads up before they did anything. But this didn't sit well with them, especially the guy who had cast the fireball. He had saved Rude already, so he was not having it that Rude was being ungrateful and still complaining. But before things could get out of hand, their attention was then diverted by a member of their group who had discovered the miasma grass colony they had been searching for. And this delighted his comrades while this surprised Rude, as he realized that these adventurers were actually following him because they wanted his harvesting spot. But the mage couldn't let Rude accuse them of such underhanded tactics. He sneered at Rude and made it clear that they weren't what he assumed they were. They were just adventurers earning a living through the labyrinth, and had just so happened to meet him there and save him while they were at it. But it seemed like that was a mistake because a miasma scavenger like Rude couldn't even say a proper word of gratitude. The last part of his sentence hung in the air like a veiled threat, and Rude knew they were lying, but he also understood the situation. These adventurers were stronger than him, and he was outnumbered. He didn't stand a chance of surviving if he fought them. Swallowing his pride, he bowed his head, apologized for accusing them, and thanked them for saving him. The words tasted bitter, but there was nothing else he could do. Suppressing the rage boiling inside him, he kept his composure, knowing that survival was more important than his wounded pride at this moment. A few moments later, Rude returned to his base, eating at the Full Belly restaurant. But even here, he just couldn't catch a break. He was unceremoniously thrown out because, whenever he was at the restaurant, the smell made the food taste horrible, and they were blunt about it, as he just couldn't seem to get it through his head. They insisted he should abandon his daydream of being an adventurer, as he clearly wasn't one. An adventurer needed the ability to defeat monsters, and someone like him with a trash skill like abnormal status nullification, wasn't cut out for the role. As Rude lay on the floor, helpless, their mocking words rang in his ears. He couldn't even disagree with them. It was true that his unique ability, abnormal status nullification, was useful for exploring the miasma labyrinth, but it didn't give him the necessary skills to defeat monsters, something vital for adventurers. And as someone who didn't have any combat skills, he wasn't welcome in any party. And he was even named the Miasma Scavenger because he always scavenged for items in the lower levels of the miasma labyrinth. In other words, his so-called skill made him an outcast as an adventurer. As a grown man, he was still fighting life-or-death battles against mere rats. This realization plunged him into hopelessness. He began questioning if he was really going to continue living his life as the Miasma Scavenger, a job that had sustained him for quite a while but offered no real future. But with no other skills, it seems like he was destined to remain a scavenger in the miasma labyrinth, with no friends, no hobbies, no bitches, and his life is forever empty, devoid of purpose. Still, he pressed on. When the next day arrived, Rude went straight to the Adventurers Guild. He was early, needing to find another colony while he still had some money left from yesterday. As he walked through the halls, he noticed it was unusually noisy today, leading him to wonder what was going on. But this wasn't his concern though, so he went straight to the receptionist and asked if any good requests had come in. She reported that a new labyrinth had been discovered. The news shocked him. A labyrinth was a place filled with treasures and magic items, a golden opportunity for any adventurer. It was no wonder the guild was so noisy today. But then, the receptionist relayed another piece of news that shocked him even more, and this time it was bad. The price of the miasma herb he usually brought in had dropped starting today. He immediately asked why, and she explained that the miasma labyrinth was never popular to begin with. Now, with everyone focused on the new labyrinth, there would be no demand for the miasma herb at all. This put him in a state of disbelief. The livelihood he had relied on had become obsolete overnight. It seemed he had no choice but to venture into the new labyrinth in the Avalo Mountains. However, the receptionist informed him that he couldn't do that. The new labyrinth's exploration requirement was to be D rank or higher, and as an E-ranked adventurer, he wasn't qualified. He gritted his teeth in frustration. Desperate, he tried to convince the receptionist, but to no avail. She was just following the rules and believed that even if he did go, he would only end up dying in vain. She couldn't allow that. Her conscience wouldn't let her. With this, dread set in. With no other source of income, he was on the verge of homelessness, doomed to drift away with time. Luckily for Rude, his struggles were overheard by another adventurer who happened to need a porter. The adventurer asked Rude if he was willing to join their party. With no other options and the man seeming trustworthy, Rude accepted the offer. Thus, they immediately rode a carriage towards the new labyrinth. The party consisted of 4 members, including Rude, but the atmosphere was palpably awkward, so the blonde adventurer who had recruited him broke the tension with small talk. Expressing his relief at having found Rude, he mentioned that he had wanted someone to carry materials from the new labyrinth, but couldn't find anyone available. It was probably because all the adventurers in the guild were gathered at the new labyrinth, making it difficult to secure a porter. However, the other party members began questioning the blonde adventurer, asking why out of everyone he chose to dive with a miasma scavenger. Couldn't he find someone better? Clearly displaying their disdain for Rude. But the blonde adventurer couldn't afford infighting within his team, especially before they even arrived at their destination. So he tried his best to defuse the situation, explaining that since Rude had been an adventurer for a long time, he believed it was better to have him along instead of a complete newbie. After calming the initial discord, Bayer redirected the conversation by reintroducing himself. He announced that he was the leader of the Scarlet Sword. He then pointed out his companions, Sasha and Rick, both D-rank adventurers like himself. And as a courtesy, Rude also introduced himself. With introductions out of the way, Bayer mentioned that before they ventured into the labyrinth, he'd like to know more about Rude's capabilities. Rude showed him his guild card, and to Bayer's surprise, he noticed that Rude could use fire magic. Rude quickly clarified that although his power was too low for combat, it proved useful in dark places and for cooking. But before he could elaborate further, Bayer simply smiled and reassured him that his skills were indeed helpful and that he would be counting on him. A few moments later, they arrived at the newly discovered Avalio Labyrinth. The excitement was palpable as it seemed they were the first to arrive. With hope and dreams fueling their steps, they sprinted towards the entrance, eager to start exploring the labyrinth's unknown depths. But as they opened the main door of the labyrinth, loud noises greeted them. Adventurers had already filled the place, so they ventured further inside, only to find the labyrinth occupied at every turn. From gathering herbs to fighting monsters and even finding treasures, every spot had already been taken. Adventurers were everywhere they went. This immediately pissed off Sasha, who threw a tantrum. kicking rocks in frustration. And so Bayer concluded that most of the first layer had already been explored, leading Rick to suggest that they dive deeper, believing there would be fewer people further down. Sasha quickly supported this idea. But as a veteran, Rude disagreed. He believed it would be better to start by mapping the first layer of this newly discovered labyrinth. But his suggestion was abruptly cut off by Sasha and Rick, who criticized him for voicing his opinion. They reminded him that as their porter, he shouldn't be giving out his thoughts, and that this was why he was stuck in E rank, accusing him of having a weak will. Thankfully, Bayer immediately stepped in, diffusing the quarrel once more by scolding his team. However, he acknowledged both perspectives, and agreed that if things continued this way, they wouldn't get any good results. Therefore, they would need to aim even deeper into the labyrinth, hoping to find less competition and greater rewards. With that decision made, they entered the fourth layer of the labyrinth. Upon arriving, they encountered ferocious beasts that attacked on sight. Rude quickly became the target, as the beast could sense his weakness. Luckily for him, Rick was there to save him, but not without teasing him for being scared and calling him old man. And Sasha and Bayer didn't lag behind either, displaying their honed skills and efficiently dealing with any monsters that came near. Witnessing such prowess for the first time changed Rude's perspective. They were strong, far stronger than he would ever become, while he found himself paralyzed with fear, unable to move. In that moment, he realized that perhaps he wasn't cut out to be an adventurer after all. A few moments passed, and they successfully killed the pack of wolves that had charged at them. This victory reinforced their belief that diving deeper was the right call. It was refreshing not having other parties around. The monsters weren't too strong, and they even found some treasure, making this a successful raid overall. Just when Rude thought things would go smoothly and uneventfully, Rick commanded him to collect materials from the monsters he had defeated. Rude responded kindly, explaining that he couldn't collect the materials as the monsters were too damaged, and the magic stones were probably shattered. But this didn't sit well with Rick, and with anger in his eyes, he insisted that Rudy hadn't even looked yet, and couldn't be sure if the stones were shattered. So he commanded Rude to do as he was told and not slack off. And given that they had hired him as the porter, and Rick had saved him numerous times, Rude complied. But as he suspected, the monsters were all mangled, their guts and blood creating an awful smell that made it difficult to collect the stones. He considered using his fire skill to burn the corpses, slightly cover the stench. However, this led to more teasing from Rick, who laughed and suggested it looked like Rude was about to eat the monster corpses. But he won't lie. They have been exploring for a while, and he is starting to feel hungry. So even monster meat's starting to look delicious. And Sasha just looked at Rick with disgust for even thinking that. Not only because it was gross, but also because eating monsters was taboo among adventurers. The mana absorbed into their bodies could have unpredictable effects. And Rick smirked at how serious she was being and clarified that he was just joking. He assured them that once they got back, he would use the money they earned to eat as much delicious food as he wanted. But their conversation was abruptly cut short by a loud roar echoing through the floor. Looking towards the source, they realized they were in trouble. A B-rank minotaur was staring at them like a snack. Encountering such a high-ranked monster in a layer this shallow was unexpected, indicating that this labyrinth was far more dangerous than they initially thought. But knowing this wouldn't save them, so panic set in. There was no way they could beat something like that. But as the leader, Bayer sprang into action and asked Rudy to give him his backpack, stating he needed the items inside to save them. And without question, Rude handed over his bag. Bayer then instructed Rude to keep an eye on the Minotaur's movements, which he obliged. But as the monster closed in, Rude asked Bayer about his plan, or even if he had one, to which Bayer smiled, claiming he had a great plan, as it involved Rude's back to be cut open, leaving him reeling in pain. And this action prompted the others to cast their skills as well. Rick cast Warrior's Encouragement, which made Rude the focus of the monster's attacks, while Sasha cast Haste, doubling their own speed. And their coordination was impeccable. And it dawned on Rude that these guys had planned to abandon him from the start. And Bayer confirmed Rude's suspicions with a nasty smile. Why else would they bring the miasma scavenger with them, if not to be their target for their wicked and sadistic game? And Rude's eyes widened in disbelief as he realized that those he thought to be allies had left him for dead. The Minotaur was just an added threat. Even without it, they would have betrayed him. In the face of such a cruel fate, the only thing Rude could do was scream. But even that was abruptly cut off as he noticed the Minotaur about to swing its axe. Thankfully, adrenaline kicked in, and in a last-ditch effort, he managed to dodge the attack just in time. This unexpected feat made him smirk a little. He hadn't realized he was capable of such agility. However, he had exhausted every bit of energy left within him, and the monster was ever so close. And so he accepted his fate, as it was better than dying homeless without money anyway. But pain had snapped him back to reality. He hadn't expected it to hurt this much. He didn't get the instant death he was hoping for. leaving him to experience the pain much longer. And just when he thought things couldn't get worse, the wall they had just broken through revealed a deep, dark hole beyond it, and the sight of the abyss made his stomach churn. Even the Minotaur seemed to realize it had messed up. A few moments later, Rude opened his eyes to a dim green light, barely enough to see his surroundings. Confused as to why he was still alive, he noticed the Minotaur had been caught under him, breaking his fall, but it was only a matter of time. With half of his body broken, and the excruciating pain made every breath a struggle, he knew that even if no other monsters found him, he would likely die from blood loss or starvation long before his body had a chance to heal. And so he drifted back to sleep, but hunger gnawed at him, waking him again. He hadn't eaten since yesterday after being thrown out of the restaurant. His body screamed for food, and the thought of eating the Minotaur crossed his mind, making him laugh bitterly. Everyone knew that eating a monster would only lead to disaster. Closing his eyes once more, he reflected on the miserable life he had lived. As he teetered on the edge of consciousness, a memory surfaced. A voice from long ago, belonging to someone whose face he could no longer remember, echoed in his mind. This person had always told him that no matter how hard or painful it got, he must never give up, and the next thing he knew, he was already eating the Minotaur, munching its raw meat despite knowing the risks. When a human with depleted magic consumes mana-rich monster meat, the monster's mana particles invade their body, leading to a monsterized state. This fate is more terrifying than dying from poison, making it a taboo. But in order to regain the blood he had lost and sate his hunger, Rude took a gamble, bringing about an unexpected transformation. Thanks to his unique ability, he avoided turning into a monster entirely. As he absorbed enough mana from the high-ranked beast, his body began to heal at an accelerated rate. The once broken arm and the sliced open back were now healed as if they had never been damaged. Suddenly, an outburst of mana filled his body, empowering him like never before. Skills started to manifest. He had acquired the Minotaur's abilities, including Roar, Battle Axe Mastery, and Physical Boost. Rude's body began to move automatically, guided by instinct through the dimly lit hallways. He walked aimlessly, driven by a newfound hunger for more monsters to devour. But he didn't have to search for long, as a swarm of monster bats took notice of his presence and bolted towards him without hesitation. Despite their numbers, they were no match for his newly acquired skills. With a powerful roar, he killed many of the bats instantly. Those that survived were debilitated by a debuff, leaving them unable to flee and taunted into attacking him. As soon as the bats got close, Rude activated his physical boost, temporarily enhancing his strength to swing his massive axe, killing the bats in a single, powerful sweep. Without hesitation, he began eating once more, gaining their skill echolocation. This ability allowed him to detect surrounding creatures even in darkness, making the once dimly lit labyrinth as clear as day. He could now see the structure of the labyrinth and the location of approaching monsters. Drawn by the sounds of battle, despite the overwhelming odds, Rude laughed maniacally. He wondered which of the monsters would be the next to be devoured. As predicted by his new skill, a mass of monsters emerged from the dark, attacking him together. But with his enhanced abilities, he dispatched them as soon as they were in range. The thrill of his newfound power surged through him. Just days ago, he had struggled with mere rats. But now, even monsters far above his rank fell like butter before his axe. The mix of ecstasy and rage fueled him. He hadn't forgotten the sadistic humans who wronged him, and these monsters were mere obstacles to his revenge. Outnumbered and exhausted, he continued to swing his axe relentlessly, turning monsters into corpses, and then consuming them. Despite the foul taste and smell, he munched on them to heal and regain energy, all the while gaining their skills. He acquired an array of abilities: the appraisal skill from an eye monster, absorb skill from another, agility boost, and lightning cloak from the Thunderwolf. His body thrummed with power as he reveled in the multitude of skills he had collected. But the fight was far from over. A much larger monster appeared, dwarfing the Minotaur he had previously defeated. Still, Rude lunged at it, stopping its gaping maw with his axe, and using his lightning cloak to electrocute it from the inside. The tactic proved effective, and after defeating the beast, he gained the Poison Mist ability, making it easier to kill smaller mobs. Even the spiders that attacked from the shadows were swiftly dispatched, earning him the thread manipulation skill, which allowed him to string up monsters and make hunting them even easier. Hours passed, and he had killed hundreds of monsters. Yet, the struggle only intensified. More powerful creatures decided to challenge him, but his rage and determination knew no bounds. He wouldn't let anything stop him from escaping this hellhole and exacting his revenge. Swinging his axe left and right, he noticed his mastery improving. The battle axe now felt like an extension of his arm, and he could sense the monster's magic without even looking at them. It was as if his entire being had adjusted to the labyrinth, as if he had been there for years. His eyes lit up with a feral gleam, knowing that these monsters were nothing but dead meat. A few moments later, Rude emerged from the labyrinth's entrance, finally seeing the light of day once more. He had never expected to make it back, but he had survived. Ecstatic, he couldn't help but shout with joy. Meanwhile, inside the Adventurers Guild, everyone was discussing the recent events with worried expressions. A tragedy had taken place in the labyrinth, and at the center of it was Bayer's group, who had reported the incident to Lankars, Bologna's branch guildmaster. After listening to their report, Lankars had rounded up all the adventurers who were in the labyrinth, except for Rude, who was still missing. Bayer confirmed this with a grief-stricken expression, explaining that when they encountered the Minotaur on the 4th floor, Rude was killed before they even had a chance to protect him. Even Sasha and Rick had put on their Oscar-worthy acting skills to use, crying as if they were genuinely grieving. Lankars believed their story for now, understanding the gravity of the situation. For the time being, he prohibited entry into the labyrinth. Even the receptionist was distraught, believing that the adventurer she saw regularly would never return. To her surprise, that same adventurer suddenly appeared right at the door. His arrival shocked everyone, especially the trio. They began sweating bullets, but Bayer quickly composed himself and acted accordingly. He rushed towards Rude, pretending to be relieved to see him alive and well. In reality, he got close to threaten Rude, warning him that if he said anything unnecessary, he would kill him on the spot. And just like before, Bayer's cronies followed suit, acting all buddy-buddy, as if they hadn't just tried to kill him. Even Sasha, the audacious bitch, claimed they had tried to go back to look for him but couldn't, because the labyrinth was closed. Despite the absurdity, Rude appeared stunned and compliant, prompting Bayer to happily proclaim a celebration of his survival, suggesting they relocate to a more secluded place. However, something was off. An intense pressure emanated from Rudy, rendering them unable to move. This was impossible for them to comprehend. But before they could react, Rude told everyone the truth, declaring that these guys had used him as a pawn. Judging by everyone's reaction, Bayer knew they were screwed if he didn't clear things up, so he shakily asked Rude what he was talking about. But Rude ignored him, indifferent to his panic. This prompted Lankars to step in and ask Rude what he meant by being used as a pawn. Rude recounted what had happened. Bayer had stolen his supplies and attacked him from behind. Rick had used a skill to lure the Minotaur towards him, and then Sasha had cast haste on the trio so they could run away. Immediately, Bayer approached Lankars, trying to convince him that they didn't do any of that. But Lankars knew better. He had been in the business for quite a while and could spot a two-faced liar when he saw one. To clarify the truth of the matter, Lankars mentioned that he had a guest who could help them, and from the shadows emerged a girl draped in a violet robe. Her presence alone made it clear she was a truth officer. This revelation completely shocked the trio. Truth officers rarely left the royal capital, so they demanded to know why she was there at such a convenient time. Lankars confirmed it wasn't a coincidence. He had already suspected them, as there had been an unusually high number of deaths among the porters temporarily joining their party. So he had called in an old favor to bring the truth officer here, and without further delay, the truth officer did her job. With just a glimpse at the group, she revealed to everyone that the members of Scarlet Sword were lying, and that Rude's claims were the truth. Bayer was in a state of shock, his world tearing apart so fast that he couldn't comprehend it. The reputation he had meticulously built crumbled, as everyone immediately turned against him and his group. Desperate, he panicked and questioned the truth officer, demanding to know what someone like her could possibly know. And Lankars was just baffled by Bayer's audacity. Still, he answered for the benefit of those who didn't know, explaining that truth officers possessed a skill impossible to acquire later in life, a skill whose effectiveness rivaled that of a unique skill. It was the truth skill, and no lie could pass before it. And what could be more trustworthy than the words of someone who has pledged to the country? And for Bayer to question that power is heresy, and abandoning his comrades is an adventurer's taboo. Not only that, he intentionally injured his comrades and used them as disposable pawns. So he concluded that even if they continued to investigate, it was certain that the adventurer qualifications of the Scarlet Sword members would be revoked, and they would all be reduced to slavery. This decree shattered the trio's world. They had never expected things to go south so quickly. But unlike the two who collapsed on the floor in despair, Bayer was consumed with rage. Unwilling to become a slave, he started blaming others for his shortcomings, accusing the truth officer of ruining everything. If only she weren't there, they would have gotten away with it. In a blind fury, Bayer lunged towards the truth officer, intent on killing her. Lankars knew better than to intervene. He understood she could handle herself and could easily kill Bayer if she wanted to. Even the truth officer was shocked to see someone so foolish. But Rude, on the other hand, doesn't know this, so he decided to intervene. He blocked Bayer's advance and warned him never to dare touch the truth officer. Bayer couldn't believe what he saw. The weakling he once knew had appeared in front of him so quickly and casually blocked his attack without breaking a sweat. But before Bayer could launch another attack, Rude cast Fist, launching Bayer's ugly face across the room. The impact was so powerful that it left Sasha and Ricky frozen in place. It was evident that Rude had truly changed. Something definitely happened to him inside the labyrinth. In the previous chapter, Rude was betrayed by his team, left for dead to serve as a distraction so his teammates could escape the Minotaur. Unexpectedly, the Minotaur made a huge mistake and fell into an abyss with him. Fortunately, Rude survived, though injured and without food. Time was limited, but he wasn't willing to give up without a fight. In a last-ditch effort, he consumed monster meat, knowing it was a taboo. But thanks to Rudy's unique ability, abnormal status nullification, he underwent an unexpected transformation. He could now steal the skills from the monsters he ate. Thus, he survived, made his way out of the labyrinth, and sought revenge on those who betrayed him by exposing their deeds to everyone. Fortunately, the guildmaster Lankars had also suspected them, and called in an old favor to bring a truth officer to their guild. The trio was easily convicted of their crimes. But since Bayer was a prideful son of a gun, he blamed it all on the truth officer and attacked her. But Rude had had enough of his audacity, so he intervened, stopping Bayer's advance and punching his face, sending him flying across the room. Now on to the next part. Rude sat across from Lankars in the Adventurers Guild's reception room, the atmosphere tense yet formal. Lankars apologized for bothering him so soon after returning from such a grueling ordeal, acknowledging that Rude must be exhausted. However, this meeting was a necessary formality after the scandal that had transpired. Rude, although weary, assured Lankars that he didn't mind. He was more concerned about the fate of the three who had wronged him. With this on his mind, he asked Lankars about their punishment. Lankars explained that the 3 members of the Scarlet Sword would be taken in by the staff and undergo interrogation. If it was confirmed that they were repeat offenders who used their porters as bait, they would lose all their possessions and adventurer qualifications, ultimately being reduced to slaves. And Bayer went as far as to cross the truth officers, so he probably won't appear before him again, which was a relief to Rude. This news was comforting, and he felt content, ready to leave. But before he could go, Lankars's assistant handed him a bag of coins, explaining that it contained the profits gained in the new labyrinth. Since his teammates had lost the rights to it, it was only fair that he should receive it. Inside the bag were 200,000 Regan, which surprised him, but he knew this wasn't the time to be modest. He had earned it through his ordeal, so he gratefully accepted the reward. After leaving the room with the bag of coins in his hand, Rude couldn't help but hug it affectionately. This was the first time he had ever held such an amount, and the relief and excitement were palpable. Finally, he could cover his living expenses for a long time. For the first time, he felt like a true adventurer. It would have taken ages to accumulate such an amount by diligently gathering miasma grass. Adventurers really could make good money. But he snapped out of his daydreaming as he noticed the unusual silence in the air. Normally, the guild members would mock him upon his arrival, but today was different. Maybe no one was insulting him because they saw what happened earlier, but that didn't mean they would suddenly be kind either. And if he stood out anymore, there might be those who found his sudden rise in status suspicious, and he didn't want that. So he decided it was best to continue earning in the miasma labyrinth as before. With this in mind, he stopped feeling gloomy and focused on the task ahead. He finally had some money, so he needed to get his gear ready and eat whatever he wanted. First, he felt the need to head to the tool shop. Upon arriving, an item immediately caught his attention. It was a magic bag, and with that, the day ended on a high note, with Rude feeling more hopeful and prepared for the future. When the next day arrived, Rude ventured into the miasma labyrinth as he used to, slaying the monstrous rats with ease. And the fact that these creatures, which once posed a significant threat, were now defeated so effortlessly left him feeling bored. Just 2 days ago, he would have had to avoid a group of 5 of them. Things had certainly changed. To better understand his current situation, he used his appraisal skill on the rats. Surprisingly, the skill he had obtained by consuming the evil eye monster could even be used on corpses, and the rats were shown to be level 9. And considering he had no trouble dealing with them, he estimated his own level to be around 20, and since he is curious about his exact status, he took out his badge and checked his stats. To his astonishment, his level was now 42, with attributes averaging at 150, a significant leap from his previous stats, which were only around 15. And just yesterday, he had been at level 7. This rapid progression was unheard of, which made him excited, prompting him to check the skills he had acquired. As he expected, the number of skills had increased dramatically, not just by 5s but by 10s. The variety of skills added in one day was unprecedented. No one had ever experienced such a phenomenon. This made Rude more excited than ever, and the skills, both active and passive, significantly boosted his overall combat abilities. With this, he considered returning to the same labyrinth to continue increasing his power, but he remembered that when he passed by the place where he had fallen, he noticed the wall that had been broken was now sealed. Moreover, the new labyrinth was going to remain closed for a while, so going back wasn't an option. Still, he was eager to test his new powers. He wanted to see how effective they were on the deeper floors of the miasma labyrinth. Although he had initially planned to explore lightly, he now felt compelled to dive deeper, and beggars couldn't be choosers after all, so he steeled himself and ventured further into the depths of the labyrinth. From the 6th floor to the 9th floor and then to the 13th floor, things remained the same. There was no challenge at all. He didn't even have the chance to use his skills. It seemed these monsters wouldn't do. He needed to go even farther to find more suitable prey. Determined, he descended to the 24th floor, where he encountered a different kind of monster. This one belonged to a bipedal species he hadn't seen before. From the shadows, he immediately used his appraisal skill, revealing it was from a dragon race, a lizard warrior with a high amount of health and balanced stats. And according to the books, these creatures were supposed to fight in coordination with their companions. But this one was alone. He felt it might be worth a try. With this in mind, he launched an offensive. But unfortunately, the lizard's situational awareness was high, allowing it to sense and dodge his initial attack, escaping with only minimal injury. Still, Rude thought he had the upper hand, and believed this would be easy. But to his surprise, the lizard opted for a tactical retreat. Obviously, Rude couldn't let his prey get away, especially since he didn't know when he'd encounter a lone lizard again. So he zoomed in, and after a few more steps, he realized he wouldn't have to chase for long. The lizard had reached a dead end, and feeling more confident, he prepared to finish it off. But as he got close, he noticed the lizard's expression had changed from one of panic to a smirk. Instantly, Rude understood he was in deep trouble. He had stupidly walked into a trap and had been set up. The smirk on the lizard's face turned into a guttural laugh, echoing through the dimly lit cave. From the shadows, more lizard warriors emerged, their eyes gleaming with malevolent intent. Rude's heart pounded as he realized that even with the difference in level, this situation is bad. The odds had shifted dramatically. But Rude had killed monsters in groups before, and this was no different. He decided to take them down one by one. Lunging at the injured lizard with brute force, he knocked it down, making it defenseless. Just as he swung to kill it, another lizard blocked his attack. Before he knew it, another appeared behind him. Luckily, he managed to dodge, surprising the lizard with his quick reaction. Seeing its reaction made Rude smirk, but his confidence quickly faded as he realized their numbers had doubled. This was entirely different from the monsters he had killed in the previous labyrinth. Though they were few in numbers, these lizards were coordinated, making it difficult for him to reduce their numbers. But something felt off. Even if these monsters were good at working together, using such ambush tactics and coordinating their movements to this extent was unbelievable for lizards. He realized that just before they showed such coordination, there was a high-pitched sound, likely a command. With this in mind, he scanned his surroundings beyond the lizardmen in front of him, and saw a differently colored lizard standing at the back. Wait, is that... Oh no. Damn. He's cooked.
No, I'm just kidding.
He scanned his surroundings beyond the lizardmen in front of him, and saw a differently colored lizard standing at the back. Immediately, he used his appraisal skill. As expected, it was a lizard general with a much higher level and overall stats, but what caught his attention more was its ability called the command skill. This explained why the lizards were fighting so well and efficiently. This find made him smile, as he finally knew who to kill first. But the general noticed his gaze as well, and commanded everyone to kill him as fast as possible. They rushed in all together, but instead of fighting them head-on, Rude had another plan in mind. Using his physical boost, he swung his sword in fury, forcing the lizards away and opening a path. And when the lizards thought he was about to charge at them again, he used them as a platform to give himself a boost, avoiding the other lizards and heading straight for the lizard general. The sudden move caught the general off guard, its eyes widening in surprise, as it was unable to defend in time, and received Rude's attack head-on. But to Rude's surprise, the lizard he thought would be cut open was just standing there, alive and unscathed. And the general took advantage of Rude's momentary shock to counterattack. And being so close, it was impossible for Rude to dodge. But just like the general, the blade didn't pierce Rude's body, as he had activated the armor spider's steel body. With this, the general realized they weren't his match, so he stepped back, with uncertainty flickering in its eyes. But this just gave Rude the chance to analyze them more closely. Rude wondered what had happened to his attack. He definitely felt the impact, yet there wasn't a single scratch on the general. And he knew the general didn't possess a skill that enhanced its durability, so it had to be someone else's power. With this, he scanned the soldiers again. Initially, he couldn't see any particularly special skills among them, but his attention was diverted to an injured lizard with a particularly familiar wound. Checking its stats, he noticed its substitute skill. This was why the general had survived. The injured lizard was taking the damage instead. Immediately, Rude zoomed in on this particular lizard, plunging his sword to end its misery. While doing so, he felt a strange connection to this lizard, an underling reduced to a substitute and a sacrificial pawn. But now, it wouldn't have to suffer any longer. As he pulled his sword from its lifeless body, he promised that the others wouldn't have to worry either, as he would make sure to end them all. Meanwhile, the general's eyes widened in panic as it realized what Rude had done. With its backup dead, the next strike from Rude would surely cause real damage. With this, desperation fueled its orders as it commanded all its minions to attack together. It was now or never. If they couldn't kill this human, they were doomed. Unfortunately for them, this was exactly what Rude wanted. With the general joining the fray, the situation became much easier to handle. Utilizing his thread manipulation skill, Rude transformed into your friendly neighbor Spider-Man, slinging himself up and out of reach of their attacks, while also positioning himself perfectly, allowing him to ensnare the entire group in his sticky web. Caught in the sticky trap, the lizard struggled helplessly. Rude approached the general, a victorious grin spreading across his face, showing to it that he had won the battle, and with a quick and decisive strike, he separated the general's head from its body, and the remaining lizards, now leaderless and trapped, soon were swiftly dispatched. And with the immediate threat eliminated, it was time for Rude to eat. This time, he wouldn't have to resort to eating raw flesh. He had come prepared with his cooking items stored in his newly acquired magic bag. Like any magical world, magic bags had expanded space inside and significantly reduced the weight of the items within. Most adventurers couldn't afford such luxury, but Rude wasn't a normal adventurer anymore, allowing him to enjoy such item. From it, he took out his galvanized round skillet, an eco-friendly wood veneer cutting board, and seasonings borrowed from his aunt, and with everything ready, he began cooking with palpable excitement. On the hidden floor, he had been desperate to survive, but he had always wanted to try this, and the savory aroma of cooking meat soon filled the air. Rude expertly seared the monster flesh, adding a pinch of this and a dash of that. The meat sizzled and browned beautifully in the skillet. When the meal was finally ready, the meat looked so scrumptious. This was the first time he had ever seen such a juicy meat that made him drool like this. Without thinking twice, he gobbled it up, savoring the flavors that exploded on his tongue. Who would have thought monsters could taste like this? He even felt that he might get addicted to it. With this realization, he knew that if he cooked it just right, he might never go hungry again. Not only did the meal satisfy his hunger, but it also granted him new skills. Most notably, he acquired the command skill. Still, he wondered how the meat could be so good. The only possibility he could think of was that it was related to the magical powers that monsters possess. Speaking of magic power, the skills from the Minotaur, Armor Spider, and Evil Eye had been quite helpful, but there were skills he hadn't tried yet after leaving the Avalo Mountain Labyrinth, such as those from the Thunderwolf and the Black Serpent. With this in mind, he decided to try them out and might as well sample a variety of monsters on his way back. Speaking of skills, he remembered that lizard with the substitute ability. That skill had proven to be quite interesting and useful. If he could find and consume more monsters with unique skills, his strength and versatility would only grow. A few moments later, Rude arrived at the 21st floor of the labyrinth, where he encountered cat-sized moths and poisonous frogs. Without hesitation, he used his lightning cloak skill, electrocuting them instantly. The electrical charge wasn't to be messed with either, as it easily scattered and connected to the nearest targets, leaving all of them charred. This delighted him, as he realized this skill was more versatile than he initially thought, proving effective at both close and medium range. And the monsters here seemed to specialize in inflicting status ailments, but they had picked the wrong opponent. Now they became food for him, turning into a meal akin to chicken tenders. Biting into them was just as delicious, with the poison frog meat melting in his mouth. The seasoning even reminded him of Morphus, making him crave a beer. In addition to the satisfying meal, he gained new skills such as venom, temperature variation, poison scale powder, paralysis scale powder, and aerial slash. These were excellent additions to his growing arsenal, but his attention was soon diverted by a crashing sound and human voices echoing through the cave. But this just excited him, as it was the first time he had noticed other adventurers making it this far in the Miasma Labyrinth. With this, he quickly tidied up his things and departed in the direction of the voices. He might have found people who shared his interest in this labyrinth, and if he was lucky, he might even be able to exchange valuable information with them. The possibility of finding like-minded individuals or gaining new insights into the labyrinth filled him with anticipation as he moved swiftly towards the source of the commotion. In the previous chapter, Rude decided to delve deeper into the labyrinth, forcing his way down to the 24th floor. There, he encountered lizardmen who possessed unique abilities: command and substitute. Despite their coordination and skills, he managed to defeat them, making a meal out of their remains and stealing their abilities in the process. But since he got so many skills he haven't used yet, he decided to farm more monster as he ascended back. With this decision, he had encountered and cooked 2 more monster, gaining yet another ability, such as venom and aerial slash. But his meal was unexpectedly cut short, as a loud commotion caught his attention. With this, excitement surged through him at the thought of meeting like-minded individuals who enjoyed traversing the miasma labyrinth. So without hesitation, he made his way toward the source of the noise. Now on to the next part. In the direction of the noise, 4 men encircling another adventurer. It seemed they were in conflict, as the lone adventurer was bleeding on the ground, helpless and outnumbered. But the attackers were also roughed up, sporting bruises from the fight despite their numerical advantage. They couldn't believe she still had so much magic left. But the leader just smirked, as he found the trouble worth it since they had got themselves an elf woman. Removing her hood to reveal her flawless face, they marveled at her beauty, but more excited to know she would made them rich. And that is because elves were rare in this region, and their appearance was highly coveted, with royalty willing to pay a hefty sum for one. But their greedy celebration was interrupted by a voice echoing from behind. Disappointed by the scene before him, Rude had hoped to make some adventurer friends, but find this instead. And although he doesn't know the full story, they couldn't expect him to stand by while they gang up on a lone adventurer. So he asks them to run them hands. But first, the leader demanded to know who he was, and Rude just smirked and answered vaguely that he was just an adventurer for fun. Meanwhile, the elf woman, desperate to prevent Rude from getting involved, warned him to leave, revealing that these men were adventurer hunters. This surprised Rude, but instead of cowering, he used his appraisal skill on them, fully aware that adventurer hunters were high-ranking adventurers. Still, he was taken aback to find the lowest among them was at level 52. But what perplexed him even more was his inability to see any other information besides their level, making him suspect that they had some concealment skill or counter-magic tool hiding their stats. But before Rude could react, the leader ordered one of his men to take him down. Immediately, the blonde guy zoomed in for the kill, moving so fast that even Rude was taken aback by how quickly he closed the gap. Despite the surprise, Rude managed to block the attack. The blonde guy, impressed, sarcastically complimented him, noting that Rude was doing better than expected. But Rude just shot back with a diss, suggesting that Blondie was just weak, which quickly angered the guy, as he had some serious anger issues. But now Rude could barely hold his ground as the blonde guy pressed even harder while shouting threats to smash his head. Even his mates smirked from the side, confident that Rude was done for, knowing how unhinged their companion could get. But what they didn't expect was that Rude had tricks up his sleeve. Using his newly acquired venom ability, he spat it out directly on the blondie's face, catching everyone off guard. The next thing they heard were the screams of the blonde guy, echoing through the cave as he flailed around in agony. The realization hit them hard. Rude was a threat, almost like a monster, while Rude just smirked menacingly at them, showing he was more vile than they could have imagined. Using underhand tactics was how he, a once weak person, had survived. And moments after, the blondie's screams eventually ceased as the venom melted his face and seeped through his veins, poisoning him from the inside, stopping his vital organs. Seeing this, the leader concluded that Rude's poison ability must be a unique skill, making him a formidable opponent. With this realization, he commanded all 3 remaining men to charge at Rude simultaneously. And so they did just that, moving faster than the blondie ever had. Rude felt like if he stopped for even a second, he would get killed. Despite his relentless efforts to stay ahead, these guys were unyielding and coordinated, giving him no chance to recover. They pushed him into a corner, creating an opening for a one-shot kill. Fortunately, Rude had obtained a defensive skill, allowing him to survive a frontal kick to the head that sent him flying a few feet away toward the poisonous swamp. Even the leader was shocked at how durable Rude was. He had been sure the kick would have broken Rude's neck instantly. But there he was, still standing like it was just a tap. The fight wasn't over. The brown-haired hunter stepped closer, ready to snuff out Rude's life right away. To his surprise, instead of fighting back, Rude opted for a retreat, moving deeper into the swamp. Obviously, the hunter chased after him, not wanting to let him get away, but the leader commanded him to stop, reminding him that what he was standing on was a poisonous swamp. It wasn't guaranteed he would come out alive if he went any deeper, and he is sure that Rude shouldn't be able to withstand the poisonous swamp either. He'll come out soon enough. And as Rude turned around, he noticed the hunters hadn't chased after him, making him wonder just how long they were planning to stay in the poisonous swamp. So it seems like they are still adventurers at heart, as they decided to make it a competition on who would be the first to give up. Unfortunately for them, Rude had the home advantage. He even felt lucky that he had fallen into this poisonous swamp, as it was the perfect circumstance for him. On top of the usual miasma, the poisonous vapors around the swamp would rapidly drain the adventurer's stamina. So he just stood there and watched as they began to struggle, the swamp's effects quickly taking their toll on them. And with few minutes more, the hunters were breathing heavily, wondering how long he planned to stay in the swamp. It had been about 10 minutes already, and they could feel their heads hurting and nausea setting in. Luckily for them, they wouldn't have to wait long, as Rude decided it was time to act. Although he wanted to weaken them a bit more and wasn't affected by the poison, he realized that any longer might become an even bigger burden on the injured elf. And so he approached them and asked mockingly how they felt, being affected by both poison and miasma. The hunters, thinking he was a dead man walking, didn't bother with his questions and were sure to make him pay for causing them so much trouble. But as Rude got closer, instead of a face showing suffering, he greeted them with a smile and revealed that he was unaffected by any status abnormalities and didn't really know how much pain they were feeling. This immediately angered the hunters, realizing they had been tricked. Fueled by anger and frustration, they attacked him, even though he was still in the swamp, dancing on top of Rude's palm, and due to poison gradually drained their stamina, and the accumulated miasma lowered their stats. It was much easier for Rude to overpower them, but being outnumbered, it was easy for him to show an opening, in which the brown-haired hunter took advantage of it and attacked him. But this was just a trap set by Rude, and now that they are where he wanted them, he quickly used his lightning cloak to electrocute the two hunters, and the closest one died instantly, while the other barely managed to stand. So in a last desperate attempt, the remaining hunter launched himself at Rude, but Rude activated his aerial slash skill, cutting the hunter into pieces before he could even get close. As the horror unfolded, the leader of the adventurer hunters was stunned, unable to believe what had just transpired. He shouted in disbelief, demanding to know why a human possessed a monster's skills. But Rude has no obligation to explain, so he simply zoomed in for another attack. The adventurer they had previously overpowered now seemed stronger than before, or rather, they were relatively weaker, and he was now overpowering them. Despite having superior fighting skills against humans, the leader found himself at a disadvantage due to the miasma's effects. Still, he was determined not to lose, as he had worked his damned hardest and overcome much greater foes. So he used agility enhancement to kill Rude as he charged. But Rude just met him halfway with his physical boost, and shattered the hunter's sword in half before the blade could even reach him. The next thing the leader felt was his torso splitting from his lower half, and he collapsed, lifeless and broken like a Kit Kat, defeated by a novice. A few moments later, Rude and the elf were walking to get out of the labyrinth. The elf went ahead to thank Rude for saving her, expressing that she didn't know what would have happened if not for him. Rude replied that it was nothing, as he couldn't just leave her in that situation. But as they walked, he noticed that she was trying to be brave, but her body was still affected by the miasma. Even though he had done what he could for first aid, he knew that she must be hurting. But putting those thoughts aside, he found it rare to see an elf in such a remote area, so he wondered what kind of circumstances had led her to be chased by adventurer hunters. But his train of thought was disrupted by a sudden sound approaching. Looking in the direction, he saw a moth, much larger than the ones he had encountered before, which he assumed to be the leader of those moths, furious at what he had done to its underlings. Immediately, he used his appraisal skill and saw that it was a level 37 Great Mossfus, with stats averaging 110 and 6 skills in its arsenal. Despite this, Rude felt confident in taking it out. He had killed so many of them already, so he believed that its size alone wouldn't be enough to defeat him, and he launched himself at the Great Mossfus. But as soon as he got close, it used its aerial slash. With great reflexes, he dodged it just in time. But the attack went so far back that the elf was almost hit by it, prompting him to ask if she was okay. Thankfully she was, so he refocused on attacking the Mossfus. It seemed to have decided to fly away to create distance and attack from there. Rude quickly showed it that its tactic was futile by using his own aerial slash, widening its range to slice not only its body but its wings as well. This quickly angered the Great Mossfus. With its wings tattered, it couldn't fly away anymore, so it resorted to using its paralyzing scales, but this just made Rude laugh. That kind of attack had no effect on him. However, his composure immediately shattered as he realized he wasn't alone. The injured elf might suffer from the attack, but it seemed he didn't have to worry about her. She demonstrated she could handle herself just fine, obliterating the scales like they weren't even there. This was quite a surprise. Rude hadn't expected her to have such a powerful skill, which made him more curious about how the hunters overpowered her if she possessed that kind of strength. He realized there was more to her story that he hadn't uncovered yet, but that wasn't his priority, as he still had an opponent to deal with. And so Rude swiftly moved in and killed the Great Mossfus. But instead of him inquiring more about the elf, she approached him and started asking questions first. She was curious, noting that poison and paralysis didn't work on him either, and that his skills were almost like a monster's. She asks him how he had such ability, and Rude just laughed awkwardly, as he tries to find a way to explain without revealing too much. Unexpectedly, the elf collapsed on the spot, prompting him to ask if she was okay and if she had been hit by the paralyzing scales. Gasping on the floor, she replied that she wasn't hit, but it was something different. Since he had saved her, she felt he had the right to know the real reason for her circumstances, so she promised to tell him her story once they were out of the labyrinth. They hurriedly exited the labyrinth and rested in the forest just near the entrance. Without the miasma hindering their breathing, the elf felt much better, and as promised, she began explaining the situation. But first, she felt it was only right to introduce herself properly. Her name was Alicia, a former adventurer, and the name immediately rang a bell for Rude. So he quickly asked if she was the famous Alicia from the S-rank party. This made her smile, as it would make her story easier for him to understand. She confirmed his assumptions, revealing that she was indeed Alicia from the Azure Trails, the renowned S-rank party of the Kingdom of Ludius. Everyone knew its members. Just as Rude recalled, the Azure Trails had met a tragic fate that forced them to disband. 5 years ago, they were overpowered by a great monster. On that fateful day, they challenged the beast awaiting them at the deepest part of the S-rank abyssal labyrinth. In that battle, their leader died. One member had to retire due to severe injuries, and another was swallowed by the labyrinth. Even Alicia didn't come out unscathed. So she began to show him what she meant, but Rude, being an innocent pervert, misinterpreted it, thinking she was about to reveal both of her treasures so suddenly, so he stood up, both confused and excited. But he soon realized he was being silly, as he noticed what was in store inside Alicia's cloth. Well, it was obviously a cleavage, but it has a mark on it. Alicia then explained that this mark was the curse placed on her at that time. It was the curse of level down, and Rude admitted he had never heard of such a thing, while Alicia agreed, saying she hadn't heard of it either. She had traveled from place to place, and no one had ever heard of it before, let alone knew how to remove it, and she even tried every possible method to break the curse, but all she could do was slow its progression, and the adventurer hunters knew about her curse and were planning to profit from it. Even though she would die if her level reached 0, being at such guy's mercy was a fate she couldn't bear, and Rude felt bad for her, a once renowned adventurer reduced to this. A cruel fate worse than instant death. But there isn't a thing he could do, or so he thought, as an idea comes into mind. With the skill he had just acquired, Rude thought he might be able to help Alicia with her curse, so he immediately took out his guild card and checked what his substitute skill did, just as he expected. The skill allowed him to select a target and take on their attacks and status ailments. Without hesitation, he told Alicia he wanted to try something that might help her. He explained that he needed her to take on the skill he was about to activate. She was initially confused, but agreed, trusting him after everything he had done for her. And with Rude's hand on her shoulder and her guard down, he activated his substitution skill. Immediately, Alicia noticed a black aura creeping down his arm. It dawned on her that her curse was transferring to him, and she panicked. She knew the devastating effects of the curse and didn't want it to affect him, but she couldn't move away either, fearing it might lead to unexpected consequences. So she quickly told him to stop, warning that at this rate, the curse would harm him as well. But seeing her worry made Rude even more determined to help, so he just assured her with a warm smile, telling her it was okay and that she should trust him. And the next thing Alicia saw was the curse materializing into a demon. This was the first time it had reacted this way, as if it knew something significant was about to happen and tried its best to counter it. But before it could descend with its attack, a great light suddenly appeared. It was Rude's unique skill, the abnormal status nullification, burning the curse from the core. The demon could only scream as it disintegrated into nothingness. Then Rude casually checked his hand, revealing a satisfied smile as he confirmed his skill was working fine, while Alicia, on the other hand, stood there with a surprised expression, still in disbelief at what had happened. Rude then told her to check her guild card, so she did just that, and was astonished to see that, while her level hadn't returned to what it once was, her status had changed from cursed to normal. This was enough to fill her with relief. The curse she had been trying to remove had finally been lifted. Seeing her reaction, Rude proudly explained that it was thanks to his unique skill. He had thought it might nullify her curse if he took it on, and he was glad it worked properly. But he was caught off guard when Alicia called him an idiot. She couldn't believe he had taken such an immense risk for someone he had just met. But her words weren't meant with malice. They were filled with worry. She had come to realize that Rude was incredibly kind, and she didn't want something bad to happen to someone as pure as him, or for someone to take advantage of his kindness in this cruel world. But despite her initial outburst, Alicia was genuinely happy and relieved. She expressed her heartfelt gratitude for what Rude had done, which brought warmth to his eyes. He realized that she was indeed a wonderful person, worried for him, even though she was the one who had been suffering. In that moment, an unexpected bond was formed between them. In the previous chapter, Rude had saved the elf, who was grateful to him. In turn, she revealed her name and told her story. She was Alicia, a former adventurer from an S-rank party, but that party disbanded after being defeated by a great monster, and she didn't leave the labyrinth unscathed. As a curse was put on her, the curse of level down. Despite trying her best to find a cure, she could only manage to slow its progress, but time was running out. And Rude felt bad for her but then realized he could help her with his newly acquired skill, the substitution skill. So without delay, he used it on her, transferring the curse to himself, and with his unique skill, the abnormal status nullification, he completely destroyed it. And Alicia was beyond thankful to him, and thus, a bond was created. Now on to the next part. A few moments had passed, and the sun was setting, but Alicia and Rude were still lively as ever, drinking their hearts out after such a long day. Alicia enjoyed this even more because the food was cheap and the alcohol was delicious. Rude sure knew a good place, and Rude just gave a thumbs up with a forced smile, as he couldn't deny the food was delicious, but he remembered he got kicked out the last time he was here. Even so, he noticed that Alicia appeared to be drinking too much, so he asked if she was okay with that amount, reminding her that she was badly injured just a moment ago. But Alicia just assured him that she was all right. She had come back and recovered thanks to him. And besides, on an auspicious day such as this, how could she not drink? And Rude can't do anything but accept her enthusiasm, and then asked what she planned to do from now on. Surprisingly, with an intent look and a blush on her cheeks, she replied that she would like to know more about him first, particularly why he decided to become an adventurer. This was a surprise for Rude, as it was the first time someone took an interest in his story, so he agreed to tell it. And like many tales, his began in tragedy. When he was a kid, his village was attacked by monsters. Because of those monsters, he lost his family and friends. But thanks to an S-rank adventurer who rushed to the scene, he survived. And he would never forget the sight of that adventurer in that moment. He was inspired. He wanted to become an S-rank adventurer like that savior someday, to save many people. That became his goal. As Rude told his story, Alicia couldn't help but admire him. She thought it was a noble goal to have. Rude then asked if she was not going to laugh, thinking it was a childish dream. But Alicia reassured him that she wouldn't laugh, as she had also dreamed of reaching S-rank herself once before. And even then, she had intended to gain more power than she had before she was cursed. But thanks to Rude, she could revive that dream again, and she was certain her companions were still trapped in the deepest part of the abyssal labyrinth. Whatever the outcome, she intended to challenge that monster once again. But for now, at least until they both gained enough strength to achieve their goals, she reached out her hand and asked what he thought about forming a party together. But Rude, having unique circumstances he couldn't easily share, he plans to decline but struggled to find a way to say it kindly. But before he could muster the words, someone grabbed Alicia's hand instead. It was the same guys who had kicked Rude out of the restaurant a few days back, and they still looked at him with the same eyes, as if he were insignificant. Not only that, but they also dared to make moves on the girl he was with. The disrespect was palpable, and Rude couldn't let that slide. So he grabbed the most talkative of the two and warned him to step back. But not knowing any better, they thought Rude was still the same guy they could easily beat. So the blonde one grabbed him by the collar and threatened him, escalating the tension and bringing them to the brink of a fight. Lucky for them, Alicia decided to intervene. She wouldn't let anyone ruin her celebration. And so she reminded this boys that this was a pub, and if they were going to fight, they should do it by seeing who could drink the most. With this, the celebration continued, with everyone delighted and drunk. And as they gulped down beer, cheers grew louder and louder. And as time went on, Alicia and the others became increasingly intoxicated. But the beer kept flowing non-stop, one mug after another, which thrilled the bystanders, who had never seen such a competition before. The bar was livelier than ever. A few moments passed, and the bald guy was out cold. Even the blonde one was unconscious, with only Alicia standing strong, a smile of triumph on her face. She was proud to show them what a true elf was capable of, and the crowd cheered, delighted to see their victor, which boosted Alicia's ego even more when it came to drinking, leading her to look at Rude with a smug face, seeking his approval. And he didn't disappoint, giving her a thumbs up for winning. After that, they moved to a quieter spot to continue their conversation, but Alicia, now too drunk, just giggled as Rude complimented her for doing great, considering she had already drunk quite a lot before the drinking contest, to which she explained that it was only because he was her benefactor. She hadn't fallen so low that she would just sit still while he got disrespected like that. But before she could even finish her sentence, the alcohol caught up to her, making her dizzy. She fell asleep on Rude, which he found quite hilarious and cute. Still, Rude decided to use his substitution skill once more, taking away most of her drunkenness. This surprised Alicia, but it was a welcome one, as she couldn't believe how wonderful his skill was, and suggested they should definitely form a party together. But before that, she wanted to enjoy the night and continue to drink some more, lightening everyone's mood once more. Nevertheless, she noted that it was too bad she couldn't try their special dish, the salt-grilled Barnabas, which the owner overheard, so explained that it was because a monster had taken up residence in the Barnabas fishing grounds. He had already sent a request to the guild, but it looked like all the top adventurers were currently out. But since they are adventurers themselves, the owner took the opportunity and asked if they would be willing to take on the request, which they did. So when the next day, they were already riding a boat at the Barnabas fishing grounds. The scenery was beautiful, a sea full of islands that made it look like they were sailing on a river. But they didn't care much about the scenery, as they were focused on defeating the monsters quickly, so they could enjoy the special dishes. Unexpectedly, a water bullet suddenly shot out of the water, which Rude dodged it and smiled, realizing they wouldn't have to search long since the monster had already found them. But their smiles faded when they saw the sheer number of creatures emerging from the water. The situation was more alarming than they expected. The owner had only recently requested help, yet the monster population had already increased dramatically. With this, Rude used his appraisal skill and identified the creatures as level 23 Gurnib, with attributes averaging 35 and 3 skills, notably water bullets and high-speed swimming. But this didn't explain why they were this many. But even before he could find answers, the Gurnib launched a relentless barrage of water assaults. The sheer number of attacks made it difficult for Rude to defend from the unstable boat. With this, Rude decided that he needed a different approach, and so he jumped into the water, using himself as bait. And as the fish swarmed towards him, he activated his lightning cloak, electrocuting them all. The water amplified the reach of his skill, creating a spectacular light show visible even for Alicia, who was in the boat. And moments later, she saw the dead monster fish floating to the surface, which followed by Rude, who was unharmed, while Alicia felt a wave of relief seeing him. But Rude noted that it seems like their victory was not yet complete, as a few Gurnib still lurked deep underwater, and the fact that these creatures weren't attacking puzzled Rude, so he wondered if they were simply cautious, or perhaps protecting something. To find out, he told Alicia that he would dive deeper to investigate, and asked for her assistance in the meantime. Rude then descended into the depths, a rope tied around his waist. As he swam closer, the Gurnib's behavior confirmed his suspicion. They were not attacking, nor were they fleeing. They were guarding something, and the sight of what lay below made Rude's eyes widen in shock. He saw a hideous, monstrous creature with numerous tentacles and crab-like legs loomed beneath the seabed. Immediately, he used his appraisal skill and discovered that it was a level 38 tentacle monster, boasting overwhelming strength and health points averaging 200, and it also possessed 2 new skills he haven't seen, such as autotomy and accelerated healing. But what astonished him even more was the discovery at the tips of its tentacles, with a crab-like shells just detached from its main body, and then suddenly transformed into Gurnibs. This explained their rapid multiplication. If he didn't defeat the tentacles now, there would be no point in continuously killing the Gurnibs. But since the creature showed no sign of attacking, Rude decided to retreat and prepare for a more strategic assault. But this is what the cunning tentacle monster wanted. So as soon as he turned away, it seized its chance to grab Rude's legs and yanked him deeper into the ocean. And the Gurnib swiftly followed and swarmed around him with their jaws open wide, ready to devour him alive. But they were out of luck, for they are against Rude. And so he enveloped them in his lightning cloak once more, electrocuting the surrounding fish, while simultaneously damaging the tentacle monster. And he kept the skill active, intending to kill the creature. But the monster's cunning nature showed again, as it separated the tentacles holding Rude. And seeing this up close, Rude was sure that this was its autotomy skill in action. And now he realized how cunning this boss monster really was. But his trains of thought was disrupted, as he noticed the tentacle monster was already up close, and was about to throw some hands, but Rude knows better not to fight it with his breath running out. So he tugged his rope hard to signal Alicia on the boat, and leave everything to her. And as always, she didn't disappoint. Alicia quickly understood the signal and sprang into action, using her wind magic to pull the rope as fast as possible. With her help, Rude managed to escape the tentacle monster's attack just in time. And a short while later, he made his way back to the shore, exhausted from the ordeal. But after catching his breath, he thanked Alicia, then explained the situation, and that there's a boss deep underwater that continuously produces Gurnibs. It also has an accelerated healing skill, so he needed to hurry back before it fully recovers. But Alicia thought this is a bad idea, as the monsters have a huge advantage over them in the water, and her magic won't reach down there either, unless he has a plan in mind that he would like to share. And Rude confirmed that he had a plan, but he couldn't share it easily. What he was about to do was considered taboo, not just for an adventurer, but for everyone in this world. So he hesitated, torn between revealing his secret or giving up and letting the monsters live another day. But he knew that if left unchecked, they could grow more powerful and disrupt the ecosystem, endangering those living near the sea. And he couldn't allow innocent people to suffer because he was afraid to reveal his abilities. And Alicia wasn't a stranger anymore, as she had trusted him with her curse and had even formed a party with him. That's why he felt he should reciprocate. And so, with determination, he turned to Alicia and said he needed to share something important, but made her promise not to tell anyone. And Alicia agreed, but she was shocked as Rude revealed his secret. A few moments later, back at the seabed, the boss was tirelessly working to create more sea minions, confident that the adventurer had been scared away. But to its surprise, a figure zoomed in fast from above. It was the same adventurer from before. Utilizing the same high-speed swimming skill as its minions, Rude effortlessly slashed through the monster fishes. And the boss reacted quickly. It extended multiple tentacles to stop him, but Rude just weaved through them with ease like butter, closing the distance and stabbing the creature in its soft spot. Still, the boss was thinking it still had a chance to counterattack, so it lashed out another attack. But Rude just smirked and activated his lightning cloak, electrocuting it from the inside. And with that, he successfully killed the boss, and all the remaining fish monsters around him fell as well. And the fishing spot should now return to its peaceful state, but Rude's mind was preoccupied with thoughts of Alicia. After witnessing him devour a monster, he wondered how she felt about him. What would she say when they got back? The uncertainty gnawed at him, but he braced himself for whatever was to come. And as he reached the shore, his eyes filled with dread when he saw no sign of Alicia. The absence hit him hard. Still, he forced a smile, as he questioned himself why he even assumed she'd wait for him. He got his hopes up again, but as he walked back, despite the smile he wore, you could see his whole body slump under the weight of his emotions. But all of it faded as he heard Alicia's voice again. She emerged from the bushes carrying a bunch of wood and twigs she had gathered near the forest, and was relieved to see that he didn't look hurt. So without missing a beat, she continued with her task, assembling the branches she had gathered for a campfire, explaining she couldn't just sit still while waiting and wanted to help him dry his clothes. But Rude was just standing there shocked by how casual she was after finding out what he was doing with the monsters. So he asked if she was really okay with that, which she admitted that it did surprise her quite a bit, but the fact that he trusted her enough to reveal his secrets made her happier than anything else. With this, a sudden spark made his world more colorful than before, and her smile helped this grow stronger. And so he thanked her, feeling a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. And now that his worries were out of the way, he confidently revealed that he wanted to get the boss's skill as well. So he cut off a part to bring back. But he thought it might be strange if only he ate, so he brought back some Barnabas fish too. And before he could even finish his sentence, Alicia's eyes lit up excitedly, and she told him she would love to eat it. And her enthusiasm made him smile. She was totally different from anyone he knew, subverting every expectation he had. And they prepared the food together. And while they did, Rude decided it might be the right time to tell her about the first time he ate a monster. A few moments later, night enveloped the land, and only the campfire illuminated their surroundings. Alicia was happily eating the food Rudy had prepared. Listening intently to his story, she remarked how there was such a reason behind his transformation, and Rude could only laugh at the irony of the unfortunate event that brought an E-rank weakling like him a step closer to his dream. Alicia couldn't help but be thankful for that event too, as Rude had used his newfound power to save her from the adventurer hunters and lift her curse. As she savored the meal, Alicia commented on how surprisingly delicious the cooked monster meat looked. Rude confirmed her observation with a grin, explaining that monsters taste pretty good when cooked right. He mentioned that he didn't need to eat it anymore, but wanted to try cooking it properly. When he offered her some, Alicia declined, not wanting to risk the same symptoms he had experienced. With that out of the way and Rude opening up to her, Alicia asked again if he was willing to join her party. But Rude, who was still wary from past betrayals, needed to be sure of her intentions. He asked why she was so eager to team up with him when she could have stronger acquaintances. And so Alicia explained that it had been 5 years since she got cursed. Even if her former comrades didn't die in the labyrinth, considering the human lifespan, many might have retired. Moreover, most adventurers on the front lines have quite a few screws loose, making it hard to trust them with her life. For adventuring together, she wanted someone she could trust with her back, and she believed Rude was that person. This answer resonated with Rude, as trust was what he sought too. With this understanding, he finally agreed to form a party with Alicia. The night felt warmer than ever. their newfound companionship bringing a sense of hope and warmth to the otherwise cold world they navigated.